My name is Tao Dong. I'm a UX researcher on the Flutter team. So today I will talk about API usability and some lessons I have learned from doing API usability studies on Flutter and through observing how people actually use the API that we provide in the SDK. So why is API usability important? And it's because API usability issues can lead to bugs in your code, and some of those bugs can be mission critical. And it also makes programming less efficient and less enjoyable for a lot of people. But when we talk about API usability, it's actually not just one thing, and we need to care about three complementary areas. And there are API design tools that make APIs discoverable and usable, as well as documentation, which explain how to use APIs in the libraries. And often you can find that one API usability issue can be solved in many different ways within this space. So how can we make APIs more usable? Here I share some lessons we have learned from UX research on Flutter. The first lesson is reducing context switching during programming. And here I specifically mean programmers can move much faster if they don't have to leave their code editor to look for the information they need for a problem they encounter during programming. That's why it's pretty common to see programmers would look for information in the source code of the IDE instead of going to their web browser and look for online references. So having a lot of documentation is obviously a great thing to have, but what matters more is how and where the user of the API is going to access most relevant information during programming. I'm a strong believer in high-quality API documentation in the source code itself, because that way you don't require the user of your API to switch a context to somewhere else and risk not getting back to their original task. The second lesson is that as API designers, we should help users build a clear mental model when they're dealing with complex APIs. So in a recent UX study we observed that participants had trouble understanding how different building blocks in Flutter animations were related to one another. Just you can see that you have to really digest these concepts. So one potential way to address this issue is to visualize the conceptual model of such a complex API using a visual representation like this one, and then map different APIs to relevant parts of this model, and also leverage some familiar mental models that the user might already have. The third lesson is speaking your user's language. Anyone knows what the block widget does in Flutter? It's okay if you don't have a clue, because nobody really knows. But if I ask you about this widget instead, who knows what list view does? I bet many of you do. But you probably didn't know that block was older name of list view until early 2017. So very early on, we found that users really could not find block when they were trying to find a widget that can scroll a list of things. And then we changed the name and made the widget much easier to discover. And the next lesson is enable programming by example. Everyone loves examples, but that does not mean having a bunch of examples somewhere is good enough. We used to have a feature that we thought was clever. We had a link on our website which will allow the user to search for all the usage of an API inside of the Flutter repository. But the result that it only overwhelmed our users, because there were so many, and none of those had screenshots to tell you which one is the one you are looking for. As this study participant pointed out, it's kind of overwhelming. So what do we realize? That having curated and a focused sample code in the API documentation itself, and at the same time provide the screenshots, illustrations to show the output of that piece of code is really important to guide the user and to help them quickly understand what the API does and decide whether this sample code is relevant to their task or not. The last lesson I'd like to share today is that the API and tooling should really promote recognition rather than recall. As an example, probably a lot of you have used this colors API, but this API used to require the user to remember specific values for different shades of the color, and it also used a map to store these colors, store these values. So you kind of need to remember this specific number to use this API, and it also does not autocomplete well because the map keys doesn't autocomplete. After realizing there was a problem with this API, we redesigned this API and make sure all the shades of a particular color would show up in the autocomplete box, and also add a little preview on the sidebar of the code editor to tell you which exact shade you have selected. So these changes have turned a pretty expensive recall operation in the user's head to a less expensive recognition operation in the user's head. And this is also a case where API redesign can really enable tooling. So these are the 5 lessons I wanted to share with you today, and you as our community can really help us make a difference by reporting issues in usability from your own experience, and give us your ideas, and potentially submit peers to fix some of the issues. And there's a unconference session tomorrow on this topic. If you are interested in further discussions, please come. I think it's at 2:30. And thank you very much. Looking forward to further discussions.